The story this morning is about a woman who embodies shame. It's a story of failure. It's a story of guilt. Certainly of one of abuse. And of course, shame. But I want you to also listen to the story very carefully, because the story has more than just those elements, just more than those negative elements. It also has a huge element of grace. And grace is that redeeming factor. Grace is the salvation from shame. And grace is what transpires in our story. Let me give you the story in brief. Imagine this. You've got a crowd of people. Jesus has been teaching at the Mount of Olives, and there's a crowd of people that are gathered. And now the crowd has parted a bit, and into the middle of this circle, the Pharisees are dragging this woman half naked into the middle of this circle. She's standing, they're sitting, they're all gawking, they're pointing fingers, they're doing all of the things that we normally do when something shocks us. Jesus is teaching, and his teaching is interrupted. And the Pharisees stop him in order to bring this woman before him as a rabbi, as a teacher, as one who is supposedly knowledgeable of the law. So here we have the woman and Jesus, both as kind of the center of attention in this. But I don't want you to miss who the real target in all of this is. The woman has come because of her guilt. The woman has come because she's been caught in adultery. She's come because the Mosaic law said that anyone caught in adultery should be stoned to death, which in our culture seems like a very harsh punishment. But I don't want you to miss who the target of this is. The target is not the woman. She is, as they would say, collateral damage. She's necessary, but she's dispensable. The real target in all of this is Jesus. And we know this because it says they posed this question to Jesus in order to trap him. Now imagine the kind of person that it takes in order to use this kind of a situation just to trap another. And yet, shame has no problem with that. It's very willing to use others' demise for its own purposes. So the story goes like this. As the Pharisees bring her in, she's been dragged out of her house, half naked. She's just barely covering herself, probably with a robe. But I'm sure nothing hides her shame. And then the accusatory fingers start pointing. Woman, you've been caught. The man you're with is not your husband. Put on some clothes. You know what we do with women like you. And suddenly, her private shame has become public. So with this loosely drawn robe about her shoulders, trying to hide her nakedness, she moves to the center of this circle, this crowd of people pushing in on Jesus, and nothing hides her shame. Now, here's the other miscarriage of justice that we may miss unless we're looking for it. Mosaic law said that you needed to have two witnesses in order to be able to accuse someone of any crime, including adultery. So the assumption here is that there are two witnesses who have witnessed this woman's tryst with another. Now ask yourself, what are the chances that two isolated people would be walking by this woman's window, happen to look in just at the right time, and witness what was going on in order to bring testimony against her. Probably slim, isn't it? In fact, it's more likely we should be asking how long they had to stand at the window looking in, or how long they had to be stand and hiding in order to be able to catch her in the act. But catch her they do. So whose crime is the greatest? That who looked for her to sin and encouraged her to sin. We call that in our culture entrapment. Or the woman's sin in adultery. The evidence leaves no doubt. All of this was a trap. It was a trap for the woman. It was a trap for Jesus. Pharisees had one thing in mind. They wanted to not only convict this woman, but they wanted to convict Jesus of not knowing the law, of refusing to carry it out, of somehow failing his moral responsibilities. Question to Jesus is this. Now, the law of Moses says that we are to stone to death every woman who does this. You notice their words. Every woman who does this. Where's the man in all of this? I guess I can imagine that when they burst into the room, when they seized her, they told him, get dressed quickly, and then he slipped out the back. Actually, the law of Moses doesn't say her. It says anyone caught in adultery. What do you say, teacher, that we should do with this woman? Now, they just quoted the law of Moses, kind of. So now the intent is not that they want to know whether Jesus knows what to do, but whether he will actually carry it out. Question is a trap. She's immaterial, but she's there. Now I imagine going through her mind at this time, she's thinking about running, but where would she go? She could claim mistreatment, because certainly there was, but who would she say that to? She could deny the act, but after all, she was caught, she was seen. Or she could beg for mercy. But I'm not thinking any of the men that brought her there were in any mood for mercy. So she's stuck there in the middle of this circle with Jesus, waiting for the judgment, waiting for the punishment, waiting for the weight of guilt and shame to come down. Now, I know you probably all know the story. You all know what's coming up. You all know what's happening. But I want you to kind of put that aside, because I want you to feel the surprise of this verdict. It says Jesus is sitting there teaching. Now, if you look around, you're seated and I'm standing. In our culture, teachers stand to teach and everybody else sits. In their society, they would have been standing around or kneeling, and he would have been sitting. So it isn't entirely true that Jesus just bent down to do something mysterious in the sand. He was already seated there. And when the question comes, he listens to them. They continue to present their case. They continue to lay it out. They continue to work the entrapment. They continue to hope that he'll make some statement. And he is silent at first. Then writing in the sand, he stoops over a little more to write in the dirt. And our expectation would be that there's going to be this great judgment that's going to happen. How many of you have been watching the Bible on Sunday